How can you really know where something was made, or even what it's made of? It's easy to tell with real-life things, but what about the content on our screens? Now more than ever, verified authenticity is critical, especially with the advent of AI. That's why a global community, including companies, organizations, and civic leaders, have come together in the Content Authenticity Initiative. The movement's goal is to promote universal adoption of content credentials, the open standard for content authenticity and provenance that can be attached to images, video and audio files, documents, and more. Think of it as a digital nutrition label. Camera and software companies are already including it in their products. You can choose to embed content credentials in your files and make it clear for people to review. You can interact with this icon to see the origin and edit history of the file. Content credentials can be stored in the cloud for added durability. The underlying technology implements the C2PA open standard, and the Content Authenticity Initiative is helping make it more widespread with free open source tools. On top of that, we're working with educators, policymakers, creators, and the industry to speed up the adoption of content transparency. Together, we can create a world with trust and transparency built into what we create, share, and see online.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome from all around the world, as I can see in the chat. For those of you joining from Europe, I hope you're somehow cooler than me and your country has discovered air conditioning. It's great to be with you all today for this Content Authenticity Initiative conversation around AI-free spaces and kind of how we can maybe keep it human in certain ways. A little bit of housekeeping before we start today. So there will be a Q&A at the end of this session. So if you have any questions throughout, please do drop them in the chat on the side. And we also are going to have just a little poll to gauge your opinion on whether AI spaces will be more popular with users strictly for only AI-free content, or if it's about providing the options within existing platforms. But yeah, I guess today we're here really to talk about a trend and a conversation which I think has really started to gain momentum this year, particularly with the background of kind of the saturation of synthetic content and AI-generated media, particularly on social media, and people pushing back against this and trying to carve out spaces where human content, human creativity is either protected or guaranteed. And so I'm delighted today to be joined by three experts and people really working on these kinds of challenges and these opportunities as well from various different perspectives. And so first to join me on stage today is Nathan Freitas, who is the Director of Reality, which I think is a brilliant title. I'm jealous of that one, Nathan. And he's from a company called Proofmode, or an organization, I should say, called Proofmode, who works on building open source tools for inspecting and verifying media and its authenticity. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us today.
So glad to be here with you as a human. I think we're all humans, so this is
avatars are good enough now that you know we need to get some credentials somehow on live video. But
oh yeah, Nathan, show that today.
Yeah, Nathan, thank you again, for joining us. And I think it's really valuable to have your perspective here as someone who is really on the front lines of trying to make these kind of AI-free spaces a reality, specifically working with Divine, which I'm sure you can tell us much more about. And I know we have some materials that you're going to share with us around that. But for those who don't know, Divine is an organization or a platform which is being set up with Jack Dorsey, one of the original co-founders of Twitter. Really with this sense of trying to recreate, I guess, Nathan, if that's the right word, the magic of kind of Vine as this kind of platform for sort of short form human creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just, that was a part of, originally it was, can we build a more open video sharing platform? But then Rabble, Evan Henschel-Plath, who's the real original founder, and he worked at Twitter and Odeo with Jack, realized the magic was the humans, raw, direct from camera. And that team just said, we have to make sure we can ensure this is that kind of human space. And so they kind of reverse engineered or stumbled back into what we're talking about today, purely from figuring out what the magic of Vine was.
As someone who grew up on a steady diet of Vines and still often hear them getting quoted in my friendship groups all the time, I'm really excited to kind of learn a bit more about how you're making that happen with Proofmode, I guess, at its heart. I wanted to start, if you might be able to kind of give us a sense of how Proofmode is being embedded and incorporated into Divine, and what fundamentally is the kind of, not the secret sauce necessarily, but what is the process looking like? Is it just Proofmode signals being used there? Like, what is the kind of the mix of technologies that are enabling Divine to confidently say this is an AI-free and human creativity-based platform?
Yeah, for sure. We so one thing, is that we at Proofmode have been working on verifiable video as human rights evidence with Witness and others for 15 plus years. So we have this background of all the ways we can ensure something is coming from the camera, from a real app, not from software we trust, kind of establishing that chain of trust on a device. And then while we had developed for years our own standards, we quickly realized that, C2PA was this great moment where so many different diverse parties were coming together to build this standard. So we fully committed to that a few years ago. And then we've been really fortunate to work with the content authenticity team and Adobe team on building the mobile SDKs for C2PA, so Android and iOS. And so with Divine, Rabble was building the app and kind of on his own, just figured out how to do this, which was great. But then he reached back to us and says, I don't know if I'm doing this right. So can you help us make sure that, we have all of the steps of verification? So in short, I don't know if I should share my screen now or not, but Divine is a short form video sharing app. And here we go. I think this is the right one. I'll share this window. There we go. And this is where you can see it on the web at divine.video. And so all of these videos were recorded in Vine, edited in Vine. And what you might notice is this human-made tag. And so the human-made tag actually taps into things like C2PA credentials, different signatures, device attestation, saying this came from a real device. And you can even do some extra scanning. So we're actually layering C2PA in as part of a number of different signals from different clients. So we wanted to build something that was both open, but also verifiable. Some of these are actual, you can actually go and look at classic Vines. So these were imported and it'll have a different tag of archived. But if you look at anything that's new that's coming in, this will have the data. And some you'll see are unverified. So we're also doing that. But now it is verified. So there's really an interesting challenge of having an open decentralized network. So C2PA is embedded in the app. So that part we have the signing happen at the camera and the editor. And then on the server side, it's built on a network called Nostr, which is a full open source decentralized ecosystem that Jack Dorsey really supports deeply. And there's a media server that then does the verification on the server side. So this is all built using the CAI open source SDKs and the mobile libraries that we've worked on there for Swift and Android specifically. So, and then the last piece we're working on, and this is what Proofmode is it's our signing server on the server side and some of our other kind of logic and attestations and metadata pieces added in on top of the core C2PA kind of format. And then we want it to be interoperable. And we also are adding the creator's assertion metadata so that when these creators are uploading, they actually can claim ownership of this content as well as, it's saying, I am the human who made this. So yeah, so it's that combo of saying this came from Vine, but also like this came from these like amazing, silly, sometimes dumb, sometimes brilliant humans who are just pushing stuff up there. And this is, it's great. So that's how it's happening today.
Super cool to see all of these kind of like components coming together to make a platform that does. I mean, even just looking at it now, it's giving me some good quality nostalgia for seeing this, Nathan.
Sure.
I think one question for me is, you mentioned there that there's some kind of like archival vines going in there, I guess. But I guess one thing is, at the moment, you might have noticed it as well online, is that kind of there's this growing sort of paranoia and skepticism that sometimes comes into play when people are viewing any content now, because they're aware of what AI can do. And so I wonder if, with these kinds of platforms, there is an appeal of almost like the safety of the platform, right? You can lower your guard around kind of, is this AI, is this not? But I wonder, is there any concern that some content might somehow slip through the net, and that might actually kind of, in some respects, compromise that sense of safety that people have? I guess, in another word, or another way of putting it is like, do you feel like a truly AI-free platform is possible, especially with all of the ranges of tools that are now out there, which are maybe more subtle than kind of full-on deepfakes or VO3 style videos?
I think the environment of a social network is interesting because you also have reputation and relationships and trust. And so it's not purely yes or no, this has a valid C2PA signature or a trusted signature. You're actually layering on other signals around humanness and is this someone you know? And so I think this is where some new behaviors, we can almost, we're figuring things out. Do you do like a Reddit, before Reddit Ask Me Anything, a kind of a proof of life, proof of human check-in video? I actually did something like this. I'll share my screen briefly again. On LinkedIn for today, I recorded a video here of myself wearing this shirt, checking in, saying, hey, this is really me. I'm about to be on this event. I could have put this on Divine as well. And so this gives you that CR logo, but there's thoughts I have around how you establish sort of your humanness and then maintain that through a network of people who then endorse you. And so we also know that we are layering in other tools related to AI detection, but they're very expensive, right? So I think what C2PA gives us is this like first layer that does the job, most of the job. And then maybe there's still people need to flag things and say, this might look like someone using Proofmode to record their screen of an AI video, for instance. That comes up. And so we still need humans. Not only do we want proof of human, but we need humans to be part of this process of adding on kind of trust signals. So I think that's really what we've learned in all of our work, that, seeing the CR logo is really just a first step, whether it be human rights, war crimes investigation, whether it be on a network like Divine. We still need other layers on top of it, but it's really amazing to have that first step to say, hey, we know this came from software we trust, through a system we trust that's been gone through conformance and things like that. So
yeah, for sure. And I think that's something that ultimately, as adoption grows of C2PA and content credentials actually start surfacing more on platforms, I guess that is the hope, that people, still view things critically, still kind of interrogate content, but they see that as a kind of, as you said, almost like a mark of some kind of structure underpinning how that content is being shared and what information we have about it. You touched on there, Nathan, about the kind of the human rights reporting stuff. And I know, through our mutual friends at Witness, who do brilliant work in the space as well, that's a really critical area. I wonder, do you see kind of outside of the sort of general social media sphere, do you see kind of like AI-free spaces as important to kind of information integrity in those more critical contexts? I mean, is this something that you think might start to really start to take hold in the context of kind of, the law, courts of law, or in The Hague, or spaces like this, where that kind of assertion will be expected to be admitted as like evidence or something like this?
Yeah, we've worked through this quite a bit with Witness, with Starling Labs, with others who, we have to write in the brief or in the documentation submitted in a legal context, why do we trust this? What are the cryptographic digital signatures from who, et cetera? So this is already expected, the ability to, back up some key piece of evidence with, again, both expert witness, but self kind of verifiable evidence because of digital signatures, for instance, are a big part of actually the legal process. I think also from an advocacy perspective, we want to, the more we can create this understanding that here's a set of documentation that's direct from camera, here's a set of information about an event, be it a World Cup match or a protest or a food delivery to your house by a trusted vendor. All of these things can be so easily manipulated or outright generated, and so it's really important that we capture and identify these things. And so we've been working on a few things in this area around, first, our baseline project, which was trying to create a baseline of reality of the earth, of culture. So we have things like Dia de los Muertos from Mexico. We have documentation from hurricane aftermaths. We had someone for a whole year just document Cape Town in 2023. We had an indigenous caravan that was an advocacy group document all of their 2 weeks of travel to deliver various legal paperwork. And this ended up in court in Mexico because there was a verifiable record that papers had been served, for instance. So the more that we can create these verifiable sets of reality, the better. And then on top of that, I mentioned creator's assertion and kind of there's the C2PA does the device, the software, that layer. Then you need the human layer. And so the creator's assertion provides that. And just yesterday, I bought a $50 SSL.com COG certificate, and I had to show my passport and a selfie, and I'm not a fan of all of it. It's useful. Like, I don't want my whole life to have to, prove I'm who I am online with government identities. But in this context, where I want to embed my real name and my identity into content I'm capturing, the COG stuff is really cool and really impressive, where I get another certificate that has been verified by humans that I am who I say I am, and that then signs on top of the app. And that as a combo is really powerful. And I know journalists want this, people want to protect their copyrights. And you also can, through creator's assertion, say provide guidance around what machine learning and generative tools should do with your content. You can say no training, no inference, all that. And we hope those can be respected. And I think if you're signing them with a legally potentially bound credential, that has more weight to it.
For sure. No, I think that's spot on, Nathan. I think everything you just outlined really gets to me. This idea that I've been speaking about quite a lot recently is thinking about this as infrastructure, and needing that infrastructure layer being built into a world where previous iterations are no longer really fit for purpose. Interesting as well with regards to the kind of identification. That's something we'll be coming on to with our last speaker, Stu, with proof of kind of humanity in the loop. But Nathan, thank you so much. And everyone in the chat, feel free to pose any questions to Nathan. We'll come to those at the end. But yeah, again, Nathan, thank you.
Yeah. One last comment on Divine. The vision there really is like all of those original creators you loved as a kid, they lost their videos, they lost access, and they lost the rights to them. And we don't want that to happen again. So I think the outcome for Divine is everyone is kind of in control of what they share and can benefit from it. So thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. Great message. Yeah, I think what's my favorite Vine? The guy's like, "Oh, you made me drop my croissant." I mean, I feel like he deserves more royalties for that one. But yes, thank you. So moving on to our second speaker, who I think would be fair to say it looks at kind of AI and creativity maybe in a slightly different way, and in a way that I think is really valuable in this conversation, which is that we're not kind of here for zero-sum games, and there is space for AI in the mix, but how you maybe signal that is important. So really delighted to welcome Sarah Rapp, who is the Group Product Manager for Behance at Adobe. Sarah, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Henry. Thank you for having me. Very excited for this discussion, and thanks for all of you who joined.
Yeah, no, great to have you. And I think really, really important in these kinds of conversations to have someone coming at kind of this conversation around AI-free spaces, from that perspective of working with creators, seeing how their communities are forming, how they're sharing content, how they're engaging with these tools. And I think, maybe there is a tendency from some to see all AI as bad and kind of, say that there is no space at all for AI in the picture, which I don't think is the case in my view. And I don't think, Nathan's saying that either, but I think it's always good to have that kind of nuance about how these tools are being adopted and providing benefit. But yeah, I guess that backlash I mentioned at the beginning really has taken hold in some sectors, or some segments rather, of the kind of creator space. But, at the same time, there's also been clearly, as I mentioned, a lot of uptake and value for others. And I guess, how do you see at Behance, seeing all of the kind of cool creations and communities that center around them? How do you see kind of creators using AI, and I guess threading that needle when it comes to using it in a way which is fun or exciting or creative, but then also potentially trying to maybe either avoid or try and provide that nuance to people who are seeing what they're making?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's been really fascinating to see this unfold on Behance and across the internet over the past few years. And I think for a platform like Behance, which is a place, we're not a platform necessarily that you come to see reality. So I think like we're in a bit of a different space where we're a platform where you come to play creatively, to see how people, what people are coming up with, what they're making. And so I think like in regards to AI, our approach is really more about transparency of the creative process. And letting people know how something was made. Yeah, and in terms of how people are using it, like we've seen a lot of big changes in the past few years in regards to how creators feel about AI tools. And the Adobe design team, we recently did a big survey where we spoke with thousands of professional creators, and actually 83% of them said that they find AI to be a positive force in their work. And I think that's a pretty big shift from where we're at a few years ago. And like what we're seeing is that people have feel this big distinction between AI assistive tools, something, like sharpen, subject masking, which are really just like an evolution of editing tools that we've had to give you more precision, and generative tools. So add object addition, generative fill. And so I think like those two things feel very different to the community. And especially with the generative tools, I think people do find them very useful, but that's a bit scarier for the community, and it's very new. And so people are still figuring out how to use it. But we hear from the community that they love using AI like at the start of their process, particularly with ideation and brainstorming. And that, for a lot of people, these tools are helping their speed and their output quality. So I think we're seeing people become more comfortable with them in the creative process. We see some people love them. We see some people really not want to use them at all. And like any tool, it sort of runs the gamut.
Yeah, for sure. I love that distinction you drew between like generative and assistive tooling. I think makes me think to a conversation which is quite current today, which is there was an announcement that Google have invested in A24, the film studio, which was met with, let's say, mixed opinions. But I think people don't recognize it. For example, in like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I believe was an A24 film, they used kind of AI effectively to make rotoscoping a more efficient process in a couple of scenes. Didn't really change necessarily the actual kind of end scene in terms of how it looked, but it made a pretty painstaking process a bit easier.
Exactly. And sometimes that is all it is making something that you usually do manually much quicker. So I think it's easy to jump to a conclusion, but sometimes it can just be, this is saving me time. I know how to do this anyway, but I can press one button to do it now.
For sure. And I think as well, like, and following a few creative spaces, for me, it's more with music. But when people make stuff, as you mentioned, kind of like the transparency of the process, like there are a load of people who are like massive nerds about this. They're like, I want to see how you did this. I want to see like the breakdown. And there's that curiosity. It's not necessarily about kind of like, I'm finding you out. It's more like, how did you do this? And I guess Behance as a platform, I imagine, has quite a lot of that kind of community of people being like, oh my God, that's awesome. How did you get that effect? I imagine some people are like, you've used AI, I'm gonna put you on a blacklist, sure. But I imagine there are lots of people that are like, that's something entirely different that I haven't seen before. How did you make that possible?
Yeah. And even, a decade ago on Behance, but like well before AI, there were like process has always been a part of what is on this platform. And it's like this, what you're saying, how did you make this, has been kind of what we've been about all along. So people do like long form projects where they're sharing like their initial sketches, their ethos behind what they created, and then you can tag tools and add a whole bunch of stuff. So that's always been a part of it. And I think now it's even more important to continue that and like add provenance to that as well.
That's a perfect segue, Sarah. Thank you. Which is to my next question, which was precisely around content credentials, and obviously Behance being part of Adobe. Adobe has been really spearheading C2PA adoption and content credentials. I'm curious, kind of what the uptake has been like of people. What is kind of the reaction been to people of these features in Behance and in the kind of the software suite? Is this something that, a bit like as Nathan pointed to earlier on LinkedIn, this kind of like little symbol pops up and people are like, what does that mean? I have no idea what that is. Or is this something where people are like, oh, cool, this is interesting. This provides me with a way to get attribution. This provides me with a way to kind of provide that breakdown. Curious what the reception has been from creators on the platform.
Yeah, we've had content credentials since 2023. And at this point, we have millions of assets with them. And I took a look at like the chart of uptake, and it's been spiking lately. So starting this spring, we're up like 60% in terms of assets published with content credentials. So we're definitely seeing it used more and more, which is amazing to see. And yeah, I can share a few examples. I think
Sure.
What we love about it is it's like we're talking about this transparency, this nuance. So it gives us the ability to bring that to creative work and add like the nuance between what we were talking about of AI generated versus AI edited. And I think that's really important. And, like at Adobe, at Behance, we don't see ourselves as arbiters of whether content is good or bad, or if like how you made it was good or bad, but we do want to give you the tools to be transparent. And ideally, like everything on the platform would have a content credential. So hopefully we will get there one day. We have some stuff in the works. But let me share my screen. I can show you a couple of examples on Behance. See if I can share the right tab. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see that.
Cool. So yeah, this is what content credentials, this might be blocking. Yeah, this is what it looks like on Behance. So you'll get this little content credentials tag. And if you click inspect, you can dig in more and see specifically how something was created. So in this case, it was partially AI edited. You can see when it was recorded, what app was used. The other really nice thing is the attribution around it. So we can see who made this, and then also if that person is verified. So we have a partnership with LinkedIn that has brought verification to Adobe and to Behance. So if you have a ID verification on LinkedIn or a workplace verification on LinkedIn, and I think they use like Persona and Clear, so that will be syndicated on Adobe and Behance and in C2PA. So this has been extremely helpful. We do also on Behance, we have a hiring marketplace. So the workplace verification is especially important to let people know this person works where they say they work when, recruiters and whatnot might be reaching out. But to get back to content credentials, so let me show you this live. So this is like a pretty typical example of a Behance project where someone's sharing their branding project for this coffee shop, and it looks lovely. You can see everything they created. You can see their description of what's behind this branding. And then you can also come see that there's a credential. And if I hop over here, we can see that it was edited with AI, right? So that's that distinction of like they used one of the tools that helped them finesse this image. But then you can compare that to something like this. And this is another branding project. And actually, if you read the blurb here, this person says all visuals in this project were created using AI with full creative direction and art direction. And so, you know, they didn't have to say that this was AI or not. Like in this case, they did and let us know that was part of their creative process. But you can also see this in the credential. So this guy here, you can see, you know, that it was created and edited with AI. Oh, sorry, I got to share this tab. And I think this is really important. So because you're able to like deep dive into the creative process, understand what it is you're seeing, how it was made, if it was fully AI generated, AI edited, or none of those tools were used. And most platforms aren't able to provide that nuance. And so we're really happy that we're able to do that.
I love it. I really want some like olive oil with some crusty bread now. The aesthetics of that were on point.
Yeah. And it's surprising, right? Like I wouldn't have known that that was AI generated.
No. And I think that, you know, it comes back to something you were saying earlier, Sarah, which I really liked. And there's a similar dynamic that we see with content credentials when it comes to things like political information or satire or whatever it might be, which is content credential isn't there to give you a kind of a value judgment about what you should think. It provides you with the information you need to make that judgment yourself with that transparency and with that better picture of what's behind it or how it's been made. We've got a couple of minutes just before we need to get Stu on for our final session. But I guess just a quick question, a really small one for you. I mean, one thing that, you know, has been noticeable is that AI is being baked into a lot of tools that perhaps really didn't have it, and some people aren't necessarily aware it's there. You know, how do you see creators kind of thinking about, you know, what is kind of the line when it comes to AI content versus not? Obviously, there's an AI edited label in a content credential, but that could contain quite a lot of different kinds of edits. So curious kind of how you're seeing that line kind of it being established, or if it's still kind of in flux, or if it's just perpetually blurry.
Yeah. I think, my answer to that is that people want a line and that it's being navigated right now. And, you know, I think that like between someone who they sketch, you know, analog, and someone who puts in a prompt and gets like a 30-second video, there's this like huge gulf between that of like using these tools or not. And so I think that, no, we don't know where the line is, and the creator community like desperately wants this discussion to keep happening and to like be really thoughtful about it, and perhaps like have a different line when it comes to creative output versus something like photojournalism. So, you know, it's like an evolving, like really fascinating topic. And I think the creator community is really passionate about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that evolving landscape means the line is constantly kind of being challenged. Sarah, thank you so much, and for sharing those really great examples. I think it really helps bring it to life and injects that nuance that I think we need in this conversation about how creators are actually using it in ways that are really interesting, but with transparency and attribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cool. Okay, so our final speaker today is coming from a slightly different angle, but I think one that's really fascinating, particularly from a kind of a future-facing perspective, and on a topic, or at least related to a topic that I'm sure many people feel they can't escape from a little bit at the moment. That's kind of agentic AI and how the future of the internet and interactions online are being shaped. But really, really happy to welcome Stu Rogers, who is the co-founder and CEO of Slide, a platform that provides, I guess, verification of humanity for people consuming typically news content at the moment. Stu, is that a fair kind of overview, or have I bungled it?
The highest quality human created information, we'd say.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Stu, for joining us. And I think, Spread is such a fascinating platform. And I know when you first showed it to me, I was kind of like, this is really, really something different and something really cool. I mean, to start, as I've mentioned, the platform Spread is addressing a slightly different kind of AI-free conversation than perhaps our two previous speakers, looking more at the kind of content side of things. We're looking more at kind of proving on a platform that real humans are reading this very high content, quality content. I'm really curious if you could tell us just a little bit more about Spread and kind of how it works. And
sure. First of all, I'll also just agree wholeheartedly and put it in my own words. I have so much sympathy for the world of content authenticity. I spent years in the trust and safety space working with many of the largest platforms in their efforts to not only identify how algorithms were being manipulated by bots and troll farms, but how content was being manipulated with synthetic means. That experience of living deep in the trenches also deliberately informed our insanity of building Spread that takes a different angle on the state of the information economy. And that angle is, when we think about the future business model of the internet, proven human activity is now a smaller percentage of overall internet traffic, and it is a premium component of traffic overall. That was really the core insight that we built Spread around. I'll take a step back maybe and tell you a little bit about the early days of how we built the product and how it's evolved, which is very related to the macro that we're seeing right now as AI and agents and bots only are really just starting to develop their own economies. But as I said, I spent years in trust and safety. Before that, I was in the ad tech space and in the media and publishing space. And Spread was a direct result of this conversation of where do we see the business model of the internet going if we look 5 to 10 years into the future. Having spent years studying how bots manipulated algorithms and created the fake sensations of traffic for more and more synthetic content, it was super obvious that proven human activity was going to come at a premium. We say as of about last summer, that became obvious to everyone. As bot traffic has now overtaken human traffic, bots can pass CAPTCHA, they can create emails and passwords, agents are just taking off. Spread is a product that's built with an embedded anonymous biometric proof of human layer. So all users are proven humans. The product architecture itself also came out of the experience of working in the trenches with the large social platforms. It was built around a guiding principle we called anti-UGC. So UGC obviously is user-generated content. Everyone on this call knows that very well. But Spread was initially built with no likes, no comments, no free-form fields at all. People could simply spread what they were reading, listening to, and watching. We threw that in the App Store as a side project, and it took off with a lot of journalists and creators and thinkers and academics. And because of the traction there, we early on realized, we can integrate directly with media entities and with publications, and they can measure the traffic as proven human traffic at a time when, again, taking a step back to macro, how is AI changing the internet? A lot of publications have lost the vast majority of their traffic from legacy social media. They are preparing for a world where search no longer exists, and chatbots are not driving a lot of referral traffic. And then put aside even traffic, we're living through a mass piracy event where the LLMs and the foundational models are stealing everything, and will probably continue to do so. We have, in the very early stages now, helped a growing list of top publications integrate this layer of proof of human from Spread, which I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. I think when I share my screen on the web version, not the app version, as much as I like demoing with a phone hovering. And we've just started to release this proof of human layer across the open web, so outside of the native Spread application. I'll show what that looks like too. As we think in the early stages of the way the information economy is evolving, we really focus on how a biometric proof of human layer is just proof that that is not a bot or a scraper. And that right now is not easy to do with a retroactive whack-a-mole approach, as the agents continue to get better at spoofing every proof of human concept we have out there. So yes, that's my long-winded agreement that we are very much thinking about the same things and have philosophical overlap. We're just taking a slightly different, I think, angle.
For sure, yeah. And I'm pretty sure most agents are better doing captures than me. Like I seem to get it, when it's like click the squares where the thing is, and I'm like, is that handlebar? And it's like, no. And I'm like, okay, I give up.
Well, you spent 20 years training them for free.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think again, to go back to something I was saying to Nathan earlier, again, it's that piece around infrastructure, right? And I mean, I think what the kind of the modern internet and AI and agentic systems that are coming online are really showing yet again, as you were saying, with kind of advertisers and so on, is, views without authentication of humanity doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. And so I guess, you've touched on it already, but do you kind of see this sort of approach to like proof of humanity for engagement, views, traffic, readership? Do you see that as, I assume, and maybe you do, but do you see that as kind of like an integral part of like basically future economies for creators, for publishers, for all different kinds of engagement online? Are there any that you think are like, we don't, this doesn't necessarily matter to them as much? Or do you really see this as kind of universal?
I think what we're already seeing develop is there are about to be two on-ramps to the internet. There will be the human on-ramp and the agentic on-ramp. Both will have associated economies. And we're seeing this in the early ways of certain approaches to charging for scraping, charging for different bot access. There are lots of pirates that get around those things too, but this is very new, and there's a massive agentic economy that's developing, lots of amazing companies in that space. On the human side, I think this will also be an air-gapped economy away from the agents. And what's really going to force the massive economic change, this is our prediction, is that we're a year, maybe 2 years away from advertisers requiring a layer of proof of human. We're going to be living in a world where bots are clicking on ad units, and that's going to change a lot of the way the open web is manufactured and monetized. I think we're going to see layers of proof of human get much more ubiquitous. Even big announcements out of Cloudflare this Monday on some new ways that they are increasing what they're calling their pacts and their approach to verifying humanity as a visitor. But I really think the core engine or source of funding that is advertising is what's going to drive the real change.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that commercial layer is probably going to lead to that further adoption. And it's interesting you mentioned Cloudflare there, again, another company that really is, again, kind of like the backbone of the internet in many ways. I know they've had some interesting projects about kind of creating labyrinths for agents trying to scrape systems to try and basically protect platforms from that. So it's interesting to see that they're also kind of buying into this kind of model for the future. Stu, I don't know if you wanted to bring up your screen and kind of show us a bit of a taste of what Spread is kind of like, I guess, like to use.
Sure. Yeah, I said I wouldn't do it, but before I get the screen share up, I usually use Spread on the app version. So where I have feeds we all know and love. I can follow a lot of journalists. I can also access publications directly. So I port my proof of human over, and I can go open, say, The Atlantic or Wired or The New Yorker, premium publications directly in Spread, and I tell them I'm a human to unlock content. I can then take that content and put it in group chats, put it on my social platforms, and I can do so in a way where it then guarantees it's driving human visitors back to the publication. That's what I'll show in the web version. And I know, Henry, you've seen the product, you've used the product, so point me in certain directions if you'd like, once I get things up.
Yeah, I think for me, it's interesting to just kind of see the almost like the workflow or the user experience, really.
Yeah.
For people, because I think to what Nathan was saying earlier, I think there's a lot of reasons why people have reservations or concerns about biometrics or providing that kind of information in these sorts of situations. But I guess at the same time, people use Face ID, they use Touch ID, they'll use other kinds of systems. So it's interesting, I think, from my perspective at least, to kind of see what the kind of authentication process looks like and feels like for an end user.
So what we've done very deliberately is connected across media type and then across device, the biometric that already exists on your device, the same way you double tap before Apple Pay. On an iOS device, we'll use the Face ID that's already there on Apple. On an Android device, it's the fingerprint that's already on that device. And on the web, it's the fingerprint in the top right of your computer. And it's based on the systems you've already given access to. Now, I showed this quickly. on my mobile device, but I have feeds. I follow a lot of journalists. Here, for instance, is Stu Rogers, who's a writer at Wired. If I click on his posts, it ports over my proof of human, but you can't see it on the screen, and I can go access that directly here. Now Wired knows I'm human, and eventually this is the vision. They're going to be monetizing that traffic at a premium because it's not a bot. Now, what I wanted to also show is the way you spread, and this is to your workflow point, Henry. But I'm going to go to, let's see, Anne Applebaum, who's a writer. There she is a writer at the Latent, and opens access to Substacks, the Washington Post, Atlantic, the New Yorker. The example I wanted to share is she spread this New Yorker piece last week about the Tate brothers, which, sidebar, is a crazy read if you haven't accessed it yet. She also puts that on her social platforms. And what Anne does is shows, oh, actually, if you have spread, here it is. I can go through, click to view this piece, and it pops up. I do my fingerprint, and it takes my over and access only Yorker piece here because Anne has open access to it. That's the high level flow. Me, Henry, in directions you want to take that. Shops. We keep talking.
Your internet is a little bit unstable too. I think maybe potentially from the screen sharing, but I hope the audience got the gist of that. I think it kind of added up for me. We've only got a couple of minutes. I mean, I think it's really interesting, again, that kind of model approach. And, obviously you guys aren't the only ones looking at kind of proof of humanity as underpinning certain experiences. You have Tools for Humanity, a company that Sam Altman backs, doing this for places like Zoom and Tinder, trying to provide proof of humanity in those contexts. I guess, what do you see as the biggest kind of like challenges, blockers to adoption? I mean, aside from people feeling uneasy about potentially giving away biometric information, what do you see at the moment being the thing that's kind of maybe stopping people kind of either signing up to spread or or people adopting it as journalists or publications? Is it a critical mass thing? Is it that kind of privacy concern? What do you see?
Well, I'll take a step back too and not just talk about the product we're building, because you mentioned others in the space. Proof of human is going to be everywhere soon. They're going to be big winners in the space across infra layers that exist on other apps, across the open web. We're deliberately focusing in the information space because I think a lot of people on this call are also thinking about the ways publishing and media is going through its own current existential crisis with what synthetic content means for the space, and synthetic visitors are a big part of that too. For us, we're a startup, so we get to think about where we think the world's going to be in a few years. It doesn't yet exist that advertisers are requiring that proof of human.
Yeah.
And publications are still plugged into a world where a lot of their traffic potentially is bot traffic that they're monetizing. That's the bet we're making, is that is all going to change in the near future as the overall proportion of humans online continues to get smaller to bots. We're trying to focus in a space where information access is also very good for democracy across the world. So we get to be a startup thinking about making a big impact on the world. And again, I think proof of human will be everywhere. We're very deliberately staying in our lane. And I look forward to seeing how many players are going to win in the space.
Yeah, I think there's I would agree, Stu. I think, in my opinion, that there are some applications, there are some companies. Again, I think potentially Tools for Humanity had some interesting decisions earlier on in their adoption journey, which maybe were questioned. But I think the flow, in my opinion at least, is towards this becoming something that I would rather maybe not do, but I have to do, or if I want to have these spaces that have this integrity, that we kind of have to do that as a matter of just navigating a new reality we're in, whether we like the reasons or not behind it. So I think I'm with you on the fact that adoption.
Last thing that I'd say too, that I think is very related to everyone that's spoken today, is as not just synthetic visitors, but synthetic content flood every bit of the information we consume online, there are layers of human curation that are only going to become that much more important, both for discovery and for unlocking access. And there's obviously endless droning on conversations right now on the importance of taste. But I think that human stamp of approval, whether it's on something someone creates or something someone shares, it's only going to become more front and center and more valuable.
No, I think we're aligned on that one, Stu. Thank you so much. And as I said, I think it's a really interesting kind of way to end at least the kind of the side of here with speakers, from looking to that kind of future perspective and looking at kind of these models that obviously you've built something already, but I'm sure will continue to grow and continue to expand, and things that we'll be seeing much more of in the next few years, maybe months. I'm not sure how quickly this is all going to move. Want to welcome back everyone who's spoken today, Nathan and Sarah, back onto the stage to join me and Stu now for a few questions. If you have any, please do put them into the Q&A. We've still got time for a few. I think let's start with this one from Michael, who says, it seems the generative removal tool showing as edited with AI in a C2PA kind of nutrition label would discredit the image for editorial purposes. It's saying AI agent curated content be the next concern. So how will it be possible to define what is not AI? I think maybe this kind of comes back to the question, Sarah, that I kind of dropped on you at the end around where that line is and how society, not just kind of communities of creators, I'm sure there'll be many different lines decided by different groupings, but again, to kind of what we were just talking about there, Stu, and also what we touched on, Nathan, about kind of infrastructure and kind of ultimately a line has to go somewhere. I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts about kind of how we might navigate these kinds of situations, particularly looking towards that kind of agentic curation perspective. I think that's super interesting.
We've been experimenting with using Adobe Premiere with the content credential features there. And so where you're importing a bunch of video from Proofmode, but maybe you're doing wipes and filters, or you're adding in some stock footage, and you end up with this kind of interesting blend where you can sort of view source on the final video and see where everything came from, see all the ingredients, and decide for yourself, you know, like, is that too much sugar, you know, versus, you know, vitamins and protein or salt. It's a little bit like that kind of judgment still matters. So again, it's not binary. It's like, I saw that, okay, AI was used to like fix a background thing. And you're right, in the question in a sort of editorial or in a news context or a human rights court, that may not be allowed because you might have removed one little thing. But from a creative process, you may still consider that sort of human made.
Yeah, and just I agree. And I think to add on to that, like everyone has a different like personal tolerance and interest in it. And so it's like hard to decide for everyone where the line is. I think everyone has their own individual line. And the only way to solve for that is to give you all the information and make your own judgment based on that. And that's when like labeling becomes really difficult because everyone comes into it from a different context and is looking for something different. So yeah, as much transparency as possible is the only way to get there.
For sure, I think I would agree with that. I think, you know, it's ultimately going to be in many cases still a personal decision about what you make of it. And I think you're right, Nathan. In critical context, obviously, there's got to be some kind of you know, some kind of line. But yeah, I think it's going to be deeply personal as it is already. Interesting to look at the poll results that I've just checked in on, and we're pretty close, but we've got about 60% saying that they believe that strictly AI-free platforms will be more popular with users. Nathan, you can take that one back to the Divine team as a mission successful. It's an interesting one. I don't know if anyone has any reflections on kind of that weighting. I mean, I think for me personally, I suspect that to attract people to those AI-free platforms, there's got to be something, you know, that's really driving them from the platforms they're already on. And working with some of these platforms, I know that they are moving quite quickly to try and provide that greater choice for users to curate their feeds a bit better. But I wonder, I mean, maybe this is a slight follow-on for you, Nathan, really, from the poll. Is like, do you think that controls for reducing or removing AI content on a platform that just allows it to be there is ever going to be effective enough for people to feel that sense of security that I was talking about earlier, that you might get with a Divine or a similar platform that goes completely AI-free?
I think so. I mean, that people are just trying to reduce the noise. And again, if you're, you know, we were talking about World Cup and wanting to just scroll through for highlights or shots or moments. And it's really frustrating on an app. Well, I won't mention apps, on certain mainstream video apps right now, that you just don't even no idea what you're getting and what's real and what's not. And like, I've had some really jarring moments where there was even an attempt to like make one of the Portugal players speak in English and like redub his mouth. And it was like, I don't know who decided that was a good idea. It was a terrible idea. Made them look bad. I don't want to see that. And then there's just outright stuff that's comedy. It's funny, but that's not what I'm looking for, right? Maybe I do want to see some of the crazy AI jokes and funny things other times, but what I want to see are highlights, and I want to see, you know, the Tartan Army being hilarious in real life in Boston, you know. So I think yes, everyone should have it. At the same time, there really is a magic in Divine of just being like, I'm going to just envelop myself in real humans for my next 15 minutes, and that's hard to beat.
For sure. I think it's very much going to be it's not going to be an either or, it's going to be a different, you know, as we're all on multiple, well, most people on multiple platforms, you're going to have people wanting to dive in for that kind of human moments, and then people wanting to see some crazy World Cup AI slop, which I've been inundated with recently. I think we have probably time for one more question. I think this is an interesting one for you potentially, Sarah, here, which is, would premium treatment for human-made content potentially disadvantage creators who use AI tools responsibly? I.e., some people who may not disclose AI use might then deceive people into thinking that it actually hasn't got any AI involved, whereas people who are being responsible, who are being fair and actually providing that transparency might get punished. Do you worry that there might be a kind of like a perverse incentive structure there to kind of hide AI usage in that model?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, and it's a good call out that it's only a small percentage of our content that has a credential. And so how we're tackling that, like, we are going to be rolling out features that try to get more people automatically publishing content credentials when they publish to Behance, so that we can like add this transparency across the board. We do see a pretty good, so like there's a credential, but then there's also user settings within each project where you share what tools you used, and people do use this often and pretty responsibly. So that's another way to check. You can see what tool they added. Maybe it was ChatGPT and Photoshop, and so you can make your own inference based on that. Yeah, but I there's no foolproof way. I think in our case, it's not necessarily people trying to hide it. It's people just not being responsible enough to share it. So we're trying to make it easier for them to do that sharing.
For sure. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. But thank you so much, Sarah, Stu, and Nathan, for joining us. I mean, it's been a really great discussion across so many different areas and so many kind of big issues brought up, with maybe some answers, maybe some that I think are evolving still, and those lines continue to be moving and forming. But yeah, thank you so much again for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. And to the audience for joining as well. I think, these events work because you guys are here and becoming part of this community. And so thank you all for coming and sharing your thoughts and questions. If you're not a member yet, if maybe you saw this on LinkedIn, please do consider joining the Content Authenticity Initiative to stay up to date on our latest developments, what's going on in the ecosystem, what people are doing, cool things with content provenance. And if you're already implementing, a bit like as Nathan mentioned, do join the CAI, the Content Authenticity Initiative Discord, to connect with others, to get support if you have any questions, and access some of the resources you might need to kind of implement for your organization or your project. And if you have a C2P implementation that's kind of on the market, please do submit it to the Content Authenticity Initiative Marketplace, which is going to be launching soon, so that we can kind of elevate your work and show people that you're using this in brilliant and wonderful ways. But again, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you soon for our next virtual conversation. Thank you.